Hi, I'm sitting here with Lucas Chaza. He's laughing already. We're talking about the Synchron Prime Flow View, and he's the project coordinator for this whole project. It's pretty mind blowing, and you can check it out with a free demo license. Go to our website and download while we speak, and we're going to tell you all about it.
Show the breath controller and how you can use it.
So, what is Flow?
So flow is, to me, doing without thinking. You're in it, you know what you want, and you do something and you get it. And this is what the flow view is supposed to be. And we saw a lot of feedback that sketched the Synchron player as something that is intimidating because it has a gazillion of knobs and it's extremely powerful. And we took this as a task, so to say, and decided to put a new GUI on the Synchron player that allows us to leverage everything it can do without being overwhelming. And what we came up with is Flow, actually.
I'd like to start with a philosophical question and say, how important is it to have fun when you're developing something new?
Oh, it's very important. It's very important because you only get the good ideas if you feel comfy with what you're doing, and only then you really actually want to have ideas and to come up with something. And the more you are inclined with what you work with, the more you find issues that you need to solve. And the more you like what you do, the more positively you try to find those solutions, I would say.
Yeah, I know that we opened a few doors with this new application, but we also kept a few doors shut. So some people had the ideas of saying, "I really want this to happen, and I really think this idea is great," and still you have to shut them down and just say, "Maybe next time." But let's stay focused and let's keep this kind of atmosphere going. And I think you did a really great job as a product lead to really remind everybody that we're doing something that should be fun, because then it will translate to being fun for the user.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it was a very positive process overall with all the discussions that we had, and of course then sometimes not agreeing and stuff. But I think what was important, and we actually agreed all on this, was that we want to make something different. And our challenge, as I think, if you think about the usual VSL approach of giving you maximum customizability and all the options that there can be, we actually forced ourselves to really boil the whole product down to the minimum required settings. And that, I think, was tough sometimes because everyone felt like, but if you want to do this, you have to do that, but we have to offer this option because you might wanna. And we always had to no, let's try simple. You have all powerful Synchron player precision view, as we call it right now, and the also very powerful but not so customizable Flow. Exactly. That's actually why we called it Flow, because we want to get people and us into the flow of actually making music and playing this as an instrument, and not feel like you have to turn some knobs to make it sound good.
Yeah, I just wanted to show the interface because when you look at it, we have this Prime logo now here for everybody who has the Synchron Prime edition. So it's the Prime Flow mode. You have this little rainbow color circle that's showing different colors. This one here, and I think it kind of transports what we're looking for, and it's simplification for everybody who wants to play instruments. Have a quick overview of what you're doing and the most intuitive feedback of what you're actually playing. So what the heck is so complicated about simplification?
The problem lies, I think, in deciding what is really essential, what is important, and what is not so important. And the essential parts have to go in. The not important parts have to stay out. And then there's this intermediate ground where the discussions happen that we just talked about, what is really essential. And what people will probably see is that we, for instance, removed, for the time being at least, the MIDI learn option. And because we said we have boiled it down to such a small number of actual CC controllers that you would need, that we say, okay, and those are the ones you use.
Yeah.
And the modern master keyboard, or also smaller ones, they come with enough customizability and also the DAWs to account for that. And that brought us the opportunity, or the possibility actually, to use many other CCs and control data on the inside that do a lot of work for you, that you're not required to do anymore. We want to offer you something that just makes you play with it.
If I remember correctly, the last months we also really added a lot of features and added quite some horsepower to the Synchron player that's working in the background. And now we're trying to harness that power that the new Synchron player engine has, or the additional features that are in there, to make our presets feel in a way like a new Vienna Symphonic Library 2.0 that gives you an interface that even shows you which instrument you're playing. So if you're going through this instrument selector and I'm going to the horns and I'm choosing the second horn, I see the instrument loaded up, and everything's on one page, right?
Actually, the Synchron player got even more features that some were planned anyways, but some were created especially for the flow. So I think it's released already, the crossfade editor that came into the Dimensions. That was actually something that we had in mind for flow, but we just released it earlier because it was finished and implemented earlier. We have something that we call True Dynamics, where we try to use the velocity layers that we record and apply a sort of a gain scaling depending on how hard you hit the keys in a smart fashion.
And that's actually crazy. When you play it, we're going to play it later on, with percussion, suddenly you have a connection with the instrument.
Exactly.
It's not something you can really put your finger on, but you instantly feel, okay, this feels much more reactive
to play style. Yeah, that's true. And the cool thing about this new GUI is that we were able to go nuts on the preset side. So we made the Synchron player more powerful, but knowing that we will put something on there are a couple of controls, and you don't feel like you're missing out by not turning all the gazillion of knobs that there are in the Synchron player. We tweak those knobs now.
Yeah.
Andy and Eric, that's two guys from our team. You know them.
Everybody who's watching us it's actually who Andrei Olszewski is, right?
So he was tweaking all those knobs. But that's the good thing about the flow. You don't have to care. It's done for you. You have your instrument, and you can have a go.
Let's dive right into it. Which instrument should we start with? What do you think? Should we go with some strings? You want to show like a little bit of the structure and...
Yeah, maybe let's have a quick overview of the structure. There are three main panels in this flow view, and one concerns the instrument, which is of course the selection and how loud or soft you play it, and something that we call tone. So we tried to make this group target everything that makes the sound of the instrument. So what you would, as the instrumentalist, have in control. On the right side, we have the sound panel that is more or less the mixer, so to say. So if I were a sound engineer, the right panel would be my panel. If I'm the instrument player, then the left panel is my panel. That's also why we have different knobs designed for that. The right ones are the technical ones, so to say. The left ones are the musical ones. So you pick your instrument, you define its tone, and then if you listen to your whole mix, you may want to turn the knobs here on the right side to get the overall sound that results.
Let's try something. Let's just play something that's just to illustrate what's happening here.
Yeah, so for instance, if I play the line now, I can use the mic balance knob to change between a more intimate and close sound. Or get more of the recorded stage A. And here, we have the mixer presets that Bernd Matzek, our chief mixing engineer, prepared. And when you switch those, you can see that the mic balance is updated. So on the inside, there happens a lot more.
Again, it's about simplicity, right? You're starting from a mixer preset, and then it's a mic balance, one knob that tells you, get closer or get further away. And with the effects, reverb, and the volume, you just add and subtract. It's really easy to control. There's a lot happening in the background.
Yes. You don't miss anything, so you're not missing out on the capabilities of the Synchron player. That's very important, I think, to state. It's not a reduction in what you get. It's a reduction in what you're confronted with. Let's put it that way. And I can then also use the effect presets, where you can then turn on or up the reverb. For instance, in this case, there are other effects too, or turn it down if you don't like it.
You're playing legato, but that's kind of the key and center point of what we do at VSL, right? Legato brought us on the map, and having note connections there is that's what makes an instrument sing. If I play the violins, for example. We decided to separate between short and long notes, right?
Exactly.
Whenever you have short notes, it's your velocity that counts, right?
Exactly. So maybe one very strong restriction actually that we came up with was that we do not allow to decide whether you want to play your shorts with your mod wheel or with the keyboard velocity, and vice versa for the longs. And we did so because what we get is a new degree of freedom in your playing. So when we force you lovingly to use the mod wheel for longs, that gives us keyboard velocity to control something else, and omits the necessity to have 10 key switches to select different attack styles, for instance. So in your string example, if you go on the long articulation, you will see that there is this, what we call the dynamic widgets that are in the performance tab that change depending on what articulation you chose.
Yeah, and you can see that here. It's legato, transition, first note, and release.
And on the bottom, there's this small label that tells you that which controller controls this particular widget and the underlying parameter. And for first note here, you see that velocity is written below, which means that the velocity you play with selects the quality of the first note.
It depends on my first played velocity, whether I should get a marcato or a normal attack or a soft attack. You always have visual feedback, and you have the most important things when you're talking about long notes. When you're in legato mode, unless you're in a full section preset, you're always monophonic.
Yes. You can switch.
Yeah.
You can switch off legato, and then you get the normal sustain patch behavior, so to say. We decided not to put it in a separate tile in this little articulation matrix, just for simplicity. You toggle it on or off, and then you can play polyphonically, but not polyphonic legato, but the pad
it's
behavior.
Just sustains.
Exactly.
There's one thing that I really like when you play legato, and we because everybody likes the occasional portamento, right? So what we did is we used the sustain pedal. When you press the sustain pedal, you can see that in the interface as well. I get a portamento whenever I need it. So you have a quick access to it, and once that's programmed in your brain, and you're really adapting to that interface very quickly, because you're getting to know, okay, this is what I do, and I need my sustain pedal to get the portamento, and then you have it. Then it's hardwired in you.
Yeah, exactly.
And suddenly you have this whole thing, and you're accessing the instrument in a very intuitive way.
And you don't have to watch out to soft release. Okay, here this key switch, and then portamento. This key switch. It's really meant to put all the patches that are in the Prime edition at your fingertips. Two things I think are important to mention now that you said this. The first one is we mapped it to CC64, so that's usually the pedal, as you said. Yeah. But if you don't have a pedal, then of course you can trigger portamento. You just have to get MIDI data into your channel 64. The key switches that are mapped throughout the whole Prime edition, by the way, on the same key switches, except for the bass instruments that octave up, but are here. They're consistent, so every instrument has on C0 the shorts, on D0 the variant of the shorts, that's pizzicato for the strings and portato for the wind players. Then the legato an option, which would be tremolo, for instance, for the strings. And then there comes a patch that we will, I think, talk about later. Even if I don't have knobs, I can use faders or pads. If I don't have pads, I can use the octave.
There's just a lot of toys that can help you to play your instruments more intuitively.
Yes.
And that's the ultimate goal, so that you sit down and then get into
the flow.
and that's, I mean, there's different ways how to get into a flow. And I think for musicians, they know that kind of state they want to be in. Switch off a few things and just focus on something that's happening right now. And that's the nickname for this view.
The flow is not a subset of the Prime Edition. Also, for those people who know that there is a Prime Edition already, flow uses all the sample content. It's complete. So you have everything there.
It's something we're, of course, also kind of already experimenting with other instruments. But it fits the Prime Edition really well.
Yes, it fits the Prime Edition really well. The old presets are, of course, still available. We hope that users of the Flow version of the Prime will not feel like they want to go back into the precision view. Simplicity, customizability / complexity. And what we wanted to avoid was this... I don't know if you say this in English, but this not meat, not fish thing.
I have no idea.
Okay,
Probably. I think I know what you mean.
Yeah, so either we have it simple with many decisions made for you, or you can do what you want.
It's also, that you don't have to accept our proposition. It's a proposition.
Yeah.
I think it's well thought out and there might be some things missing. But with everything, like with everything, also with the demo licenses that you can get anytime you want to check it out, just really dive in and accept what's in there and then play around with it. Use your MIDI toys and see how the whole system works internally. And if you can embrace it, I think it really accelerates what you're doing. Because there's so many obvious things. We're going to play the instruments a little bit later on and show you through the instruments. There's so many obvious things that now make so much sense in this kind of mapping. And hopefully it will inspire you and speed up whatever you're playing with. So we managed to have all key switches on 5 key switches. And if key switching is not the thing you like, just do something else, right? Use pads or an additional keyboard or any controller. Whatever lets you decide to switch between short notes, long notes, and the wonderful universal mode, you're in.
What we've not touched so much on until now is the new universal mode, where we try to encompass the whole instrument into one patch. So ideally, you don't need any other patch or any other articulation, I should say. And for instance, in this flute example, I can switch between shorts and legatos.
I'm ready.
Without actually key switching, only depending on my velocity. So I can...
So the velocity picks the articulation.
Exactly.
The higher the velocity, the shorter the note, or you get short notes, and you control the whole dynamics with the...
Yes, this is actually, the universal patch is the only exception to the rule that shorts are controlled by velocity, because in this case, you always want the longs to match the shorts. So we decided, if we keep also the shorts on the crossfade, then you have them matched, and it frees the velocity to actually be able to select articulation style.
So the beautiful thing about the universal mode is that you can switch from short to legatos or long notes intuitively. You still have control over the dynamics on the modulation wheel, but I'm just going to play short notes now. And of course you can still bring in portamento whenever you like. So you get a feeling for it. You have to learn it a little bit. The harder you hit the keys, the more you get a short note.
Yes.
I didn't even take care of velocity crossfade.
Yeah, but it sounded nice.
Yeah, thank you.
So universal mode definitely comes with a small learning curve.
Yeah.
But it's even more so because the shorts behave a little bit differently than in the other patches. But you just play with it for 10 minutes and you've got it.
Exactly.
I switch to the oboe here to select between sforzatissimo and a regular legato attack.
Right. So you kind of have to decouple your velocity feeling from just volume.
Yeah.
It is that your velocity is an articulation selector.
Exactly, in the long notes.
Yeah.
But when you look at the GUI here, at the widget, you can see that there is this little blue dot that moves around depending on your keystroke on the velocities. So you will learn pretty quickly how hard you hit. You have to hit your key to select the articulation that
so
you
in this
want.
case, it's a real interface that talks to you. So if I hit it hard, I get the sforzando notes. If I play very soft, I just get a softer attack. And still, if I want to get closer, I really still like that I can just use a knob to change the mic balance and just get closer to the instrument.
You may have to adjust the main volume then a little bit if you change the sound too much, but that's what the knob is here for.
Yeah.
And I, in the meantime, switched to a trumpet that has in the longs also a vibrato crossfade here. And I can transition to a vibrato patch here.
Yeah.
And also, what we see on the left in the tone panel, there's this timbre adjust controller that we introduced quite a while ago in the synchron player that you can also use to soften the sound of the instrument.
Yeah,
that's especially handy for brass.
Yeah, makes sense. It just takes away the shimmering brass sound.
Yeah, it's like a more dull version.
Yeah, and the sound of the Synchron Prime Edition, all these instruments, you can also check them out with the tutorials that we have out there. There's a template now that lets you load the whole orchestra with everything, all the presets loaded, so you can get started pretty quickly. And I think that also makes sense. Just use the orchestral colors that you have in your
and sketch around. And you can also, if you are completely new to orchestration in itself, then there is this in this instrument selection panel here, there is this little eye for information, and if you press here, it will open up the VSL Academy, where there is a lot of information about how the instruments work and how they are usually used in orthodox orchestration, so to say. But play around.
So if you break the rules, you can look up which rules you actually
you broke.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think we haven't targeted this specifically, but if you hover the mouse over the instrument and press, you get into this back into the instrument selector, where you can pick this the section of instruments, for instance percussion, and select your instrument, and then it will load the GUI again.
Just checking some whirlwinds there, because there was the latest edition. So the Prime Edition is also constantly growing. We're throwing in some more strings and some more whirlwinds. It doesn't have a huge range. Let's see if I hit it right here. And you have a Banzuri, again, velocity crossfade. I'm using my mod wheel for it. And these note transitions are still, for me, the key to everything that Vienna does.
Yeah.
It's just you know that this is an authentic note transition, and you can really dwell on the sound and close your eyes and get into something that lets you get closer to your musical idea. And then use key switches to switch from long to short notes. I'm using that on these buttons here, and you can see that this corresponds to my staccatos on the notes. And now, of course, I'm velocity dependent, and my brain has to still switch over to playing depending on my velocity and switching to legato mode with the whole dynamic control on the mod wheel.
Yeah. Or your breath controller if you decide to change the setting.
See, I didn't even know that we mapped the portato effects on the Manzuri there on the second part.
So it's always the left column of this matrix. They're always shorts, longs, and universal. And some instruments come with a variant, so to say.
It's pretty cool. Let me show you. That's the short notes, and that's the grace notes.
Yeah.
And just having that available is pretty cool. Let's see what the universal mode does here. So you get an authentic response from the instrument as you're playing it. I'm getting used to it.
In the yeah, that's good. As we said, you need a little bit of practice to play this, but it's worth it, like a real instrument. In the meanwhile, I switched to the snare drum, which is one of our percussion instruments that demonstrates that the flow also comes with 2 panels when there are no articulations. But what we can also see here is that in this case, the dynamic widget shows both the histogram for velocity and the fader for crossfade. And the reason for this is that the hits are still velocity dependent, but the rolls, they listen to the mod wheel.
I still find it amazing that you can get out of the roll in any dynamic position and get the correct release sample.
Yeah.
And I know the editing team has been working on it forever, but it's not easy to understand. It's just so comfortable to have it and play around with it.
Maybe one more thing, because we were talking about key switches and CCs. So for flow, to keep things simple, we decided to hard code which controllers are used. And for those who don't like this idea, I want to point out that on a modern keyboard, you have a lot of options to still control this instrument. So just for demonstration purposes, I mapped, for instance, the CC switches that we use for legato, on, off, or for release type, for instance, 2 buttons here. And you can, if you look at the GUI, I can just by the press of a button here switch this toggle here, and and I didn't have to, paint CC lines or so. I mapped the same controls here on my knobs and the faders as well. Everybody
will find their way to access it.
Find your way to set up the controls that you need. It's a handful. It's really, I think, the most important. You need 3 or maybe 4 at most controls in the most complex patches here.
Yeah. We just added the Synchron Elite strings to the string sections. I think that was 2 years ago. But it's just so nice to have 2 different section sizes available with the strings. So you have the 14, 10, 8, 6. What is it? Yeah. And the smaller Elite strings. And you also have them in a compressed range. Let's just compare the sound of it. And I'm loading up the staccatos of the whole string section. That sounds like this. If I'm going to the smaller section, you automatically hear that this is just a very nice DVZ group that you can also access. Let's go to the staccato again. You instantly hear that they have a little bit more bite. They're smaller, but they're more agile. Exactly. So you get a lot of choice for orchestration with the Synchron Prime Edition, and now it's easy to control articulations and then play around with it. So what happens when you get the Synchron Prime Edition is you're really exploring, okay, what's possible? How can I perform it? And I think going that route back to saying, rather than going into editing and editing curves and so on, I might give it another try and see if I can perform this section the way I want to. It will improve you as a player. It will give you a different understanding of what's happening musically. And I think that's also in the DNA of VSL, that we want people to access those virtual instruments and make them their own and make music.
You sketched out the difference between the large section and the small sections, but if you also, another dial you have that you can turn is actually the mic balance knob in the sound panel. So we've been talking a lot about the instruments and the articulations, but there is the mixing engineering part of it as well, which is in the third panel. If you compare here, I'll take a short one because that makes the whole reverberance very obvious. Standard sound, default setting, I go all the way to intimate or to the close mics, and you can see how it goes to the left because it's panned there, and it's very close. And when I go all the way up, you hear a lot of the beautiful stage A
And the louder you
sound.
get, the more of a reverb.
Yes, of course.
It's a natural thing. Yeah.
And if you want more of that reverb or want less of it, so there's some processing on it, you can still turn it down. Then you get that's actually vanilla stage A sound here. So use these knobs to fine tune to taste, but don't try to get a PhD. So listen and just turn the knobs.
Get away from analytical thinking and just making sure I'm following all the rules. Rather, is that okay for me? If it sounds good, it is good.
The whole
right?
attempt of the flow approach was exactly that, to get you into the flow. And I don't want to speak bad of the Synchron player. In contrast, we actually improved the Synchron player and gave it even more features. And Andy, our preset guy, gorge person, exactly. He went nuts on those presets, and I think he touched every knob that there is in the Synchron player, so that we can actually offer you this reduced and simplified approach that really just has the keyboard between you and your music.
Yeah, Andy and Eric Snopko
pretty
much went crazy with everything.
I think they spent 4 days in a huddle Skype session to plan out all these presets.
Easy. And then a few things didn't work out, but we're having perspectives where we're saying, okay, this could
this
work.
Is what we want.
But also, if we touch it on a different level, maybe on the sample level, we could get there and get the results that we want. And now it's really about the feedback that we're getting from this approach that we have with the flow mode or flow view. And see what else we can bring up with that approach and make instruments more controllable.
Yes.
So it was great. I like your approach. You also had that in development, right? Whenever I'm like stressing out, you're smiling. So it
amuses me. I told you that's how it was brought up.
I'm not sure if it makes me feel better, but somehow
Probably
you make me
not.
laugh too. All right. So that was our little chat with Lukas Chazas. Thanks for being here. We're looking forward to your feedback. There's a free demo license available for you to check out the Synchron Prime Edition with a new flow view. Let's go. Tell us what you think. And then just go. Yeah.
Das ist gut. Aber man muss dann draufbleiben. Man muss draufbleiben.
That's what jazz is all about. You have to. There's a wrong note. It's intended.
It's about intention.
You can also wait for the others to just change their voicing and somehow adapt to it. I like it.